Presentation of Dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho.
Coming up, long summer days are finally here. Time to get lost in some good books. We've got a diverse reading list for you, including the newest work by award-winning Idaho author Anthony Doerr. Good summer reading is next on Dialogue. Don't turn the page. Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Marcia Franklin. A welcome as well to those of you listening on public radio and the World Wide Web. With all the rain and cold weather we've had, it seemed like summer would never arrive. But it will, if for no other reason than the calendar says so. And with it come those long summer evenings perfect for reading. Today we'll give you some ideas for your book list, starting with the newest work by my guest, Idaho author Anthony Doerr. His book, Memory Wall, will be in stores in just a few weeks. It contains 2 novellas and 4 short stories set in countries all over the world. Even though the book's not yet been published, the title story has already won the National Magazine Award for Fiction, and 2 of the other stories have garnered the O. Henry Prize and the Pushcart Prize. Reviewers have called the writing luminous, moving, and vivid. Memory Wall joins Doerr's other well-known books, including The Shell Collector, About Grace, and 4 Seasons in Rome. Mr. Doerr's talent has been recognized with numerous awards, including a Guggenheim Fellowship, an NEA Fellowship, 3 O. Henry Prizes, and the Rome Prize. And he's just finishing up a 3-year tenure as Idaho's writer-in-residence. And, well, he's a good guy, too. This is his 3rd appearance on Dialogue, and it's always appreciated, Anthony.
Thanks, Marcia. It's lovely to be here.
Well, do you have a question for Mr. Doerr about writing or a recommendation for a good book? Give us a call toll-free at 1-800-973-9800. First of all, congratulations.
Oh, thanks.
Not only on the new book, but also on the Guggenheim.
Thanks.
We'll talk about that later, but that's
right.
really, really special. Let's talk about the book, Memory Wall. Titles always fascinate me, and I'm sure they do you too. I mean, this is what lives on, is the title. Why'd you come up with the title?
Particularly in a story collection where it's a very diverse body of work, and as you mentioned, 6 different works in here, titles become even more important. And for me, the thread running through all 6 stories, the 4 stories and the 2 novellas, is memory. I've always been very interested in the plasticity of it and how it determines who you are, and in particular how losing your memory can really change the kind of person that you are, can change your life.
It's starting for me a little bit. I probably shouldn't admit that, but I do know who you are, so that's a good thing.
Right.
And what about the wall part of it?
Well, the first story is about a woman in Cape Town, South Africa, who has dementia and is losing, really kind of veering into oblivion and losing everything that she is. So I tried to position the story at a time when apartheid and Alzheimer's are kind of somehow intermingling, and I tried to invent this place where she posts her memories on a wall, and it's her way of temporarily preserving her memories for as long as she can.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that story in a moment. Why are you going back to the short story genre, should we say, back to your roots in a way with your first book, The Shell Collector?
True.
And in between you had a memoir and a novel. Tell us what you like about this story.
I love short stories because I feel like I can take more risks with them. If you're going to fail at writing a story, you're really maybe only wasting 3 or 4 months of your life, and if you fail with a novel and you're 3 years in, it feels terrible. So in some ways it's very liberating. You're like, okay, I'm going to take a break from a longer form and I'm going to work on 20 pages. And I'm going to give myself 2 or 3 months with that. So I'm kind of in love with the short story. I think it fits our busy lifestyle, and it fits the quote-unquote short American attention span. And I wish more people read short stories. It's purely American form. I think back to Hawthorne and Poe, I think we really have pioneered in a lot of ways the short story form.
I love short stories, say on an airplane or something, because you can feel like you got something accomplished, and sometimes I just buy that compilation, The Best American Short Stories, and go through it.
Great.
How is this different than writing Shell Collector?
It is a little bit different in that when I wrote The Shell Collector, I had no audience. I had no hopes that I would ever really tell anybody on an airplane that I was a writer, and So it's nice now, you don't have to work nearly as hard on the publishing side of things, but there's also more pressure. You know, I have children now and a house, and you know, you feel more professional in some ways. But in a lot of ways, I had a lot more experience to draw from. This book, I feel like, is a more serious work. It's a more grown-up work, and you know, I like to think anyway I'm getting better. You know, you like to think you're improving as an artist as you grow up.
It's set in so many countries. You mentioned South Africa. There's a story about Lithuania. There's a story about a woman who was in Germany. There's a story about, and set in China. Why so many different continents?
Part of it does touch on what you're asking me about the short story form. I feel like a short story collection can naturally encompass a greater diversity of places and people than a novel can. It asks a lot from a reader. It's like a sitcom on TV where every week there's a new batch of characters in a new setting, and you know, you ask your reader to ride with you along that. But ultimately, I hope a reader gets kind of a multi-windowed house. You know, you don't just get the single sustained view that you get from a novel. You really get kind of a larger scope. And so if you're interested in something like memory, for example, I think short stories are a really interesting way to give a panorama of a single issue like that.
It also asks more of a writer. How do you get all the details right about foreign countries that you may never have been to?
Well, it's a nice excuse to travel, which is
oh,
good.
So you did go.
And then, it asks you to do a lot of imagination and research. And, you know, the internet can be this double-edged sword where it becomes this great black hole of procrastination, but it also becomes a very useful way to look at images, particularly historical images, from places all over the world and sitting right here in Idaho. You know, it's amazing what you can access now, as most people who are watching this show know.
Let's talk about the first story, the signature story. A novella, by the way, is a long, short story, right? We should probably explain that. Is there a number of pages that make up a novella? Past, 50 pages, is it considered a novella?
Yeah, maybe. It means basically it's a totally unpublishable form in a magazine. You know, it's too short to be a book by itself, and it's maybe 70 pages, so you need a really brave magazine to take a risk.
Well, a magazine did, in fact, a magazine of sorts, McSweeney's, did, in fact, commission this story and other writers to, it was a theme, wasn't it? To imagine a place and time in the year, is it 2024?
Yeah, nice, Marcia.
2024. And McSweeney's here, we have a copy of it. This is a really unique magazine. Would we call it a magazine?
Yeah, it's a quarterly.
A quarterly.
Yeah, it's founded by Dave Eggers in San Francisco.
But it's bound. And so you and some other writers came up with your visions, and this is where you came up with the idea for a woman in South Africa, timely right now with the World Cup, who has lost her memory, but there's some science fiction going on there.
That's right. I had read a long book about the brain, theorists trying to discuss the future of the brain in the 21st century. And one argued that maybe we'll find out that our memories are not located in the cells in our brains, but in the extracellular space. Basically, that can explain how, since you're always renewing your cells, how you can still remember your childhood 50 years later. And so I just got really interested in the idea that maybe we'll be able to stain those places in brains and actually pull memories out and harvest memories from brains. So there is kind of a science fiction trope there to base the story around. But
well,
yes.
There are these cartridges, we won't spoil the whole story, but there's these cartridges that memories can be preserved on.
That's right.
So if you are ill and you've forgotten them, you can have a nice day and put them back in and remember some nice memories or some not so nice memories.
Exactly, yes. And she remembers the location of something very valuable, and men are breaking into her house to try to find that memory and find out where that thing is.
We are talking with Anthony Doerr. He's an award-winning Idaho writer, and we're going to be talking about good summer reading in just a moment. Do you have a pick for a good book to read this summer? Give us a call toll-free, 1-800-973-9800. We'll go back to Memory Wall in a moment, but I do want to get to some of your picks.
Sure.
Because this is the fun thing about this program, is not only to promote your work, but also have you promote others as well. And we're going to start with a book by an Idaho author who actually originally was going to be on this program, but his book tour has taken him so far and wide that he couldn't make it. Hopefully he'll be here in the future. Brady Udall. And there's a lot of buzz about this book.
Yes, Brady Udall's new book called The Lonely Polygamist. It's a long book about a man named Golden Richards who has 28 children. And it's Brady's attempt to explore the world, the strange world of polygamy without a lot of judgment. There's not a lot of moralizing in the book. He just makes it into this massive family tragic comedy in a sense.
I'm about halfway through. It's over 500 pages.
Yeah.
And really enjoying it, if you can say if that's the right word. But I mean, it just draws you in because Rusty, the main character, is so well written. And the women, too.
The book is really full of heart. And it's and when you know Brady, it just explains it. You know, he wrote this book in the North End at night. He's got 4 kids of his own. He teaches at Boise State, and he would stay up late night. Sometimes he'd stay up until dawn working on this book, and it took him, I think, 5 years to write.
And of course, a hot topic now with what's been going on in Utah. And he's very open and honest about saying that he's from a family where there was polygamy, and so that's how he got interested in this topic.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's move on to another pick of yours, super sad true love story.
Yeah, this is by Gary Stjengart. He's a Russian immigrant who lives in New York, and the book comes out, I believe, in August.
It's on some other lists, like the LA list, which you're on, by the way, as well. Congratulations, LA Times list.
Thanks. Gary's a very funny writer. This is his 3rd novel, and it's actually another imagination of America in the near future. In a time when we owe China tons of money, we've invaded Venezuela, and we're addicted to these little, he calls them apparats, but they're basically like iPhones is what I'm imagining, and all the adults around are tinkering away on these little screens. At one point, the main character's on an airplane reading an old-fashioned, a real book. He's reading Chekhov, and all the people around him are kind of turning up their noses. And
they all have Kindles and iBooks and things like that.
Right.
The particular sadness, again, the word sad here, the particular sadness of lemon cake is another pick of yours, and I've seen this on some lists as well.
Yeah, that's by Amy Bender. She lives in Los Angeles. Another young writer. She's in her 40s. And the book is really sweet. Amy writes these kind of, they're throwbacks almost to fairy tales, but they're still psychologically very involving. In this case, the book's narrated by somebody named Rose Edelstein, who learns when she's 9 years old that she can taste the emotions of the person who prepared the food that she's being served. So she learns quite a bit about her mother when she's 9, when she's served a piece of cake. And
I think it's called synesthesia.
Synesthesia, yes, but it's taken to almost a degree of, of magic. But that doesn't overwhelm the book. It's really still, like Brady's book, it's a family story. Very contained, very beautifully written, very beautifully written. Amy's a writer who deserves every reader she can get.
And we don't want to keep on the sad theme for too long. We'll go to another book, which I looked this up, and I want to read this. It's called State by State, A Panoramic Portrait of America. It was really interesting to me because it goes back to the CCC stories, and I was always a big fan of those, and Studs Terkel. And
yeah. So it came out of the 30s, the Federal Writers Project, when the government was literally kind of subsidizing artists around the country. They asked 50 writers, one from each state, to write an essay, not necessarily encapsulating their state, but just offering some window into the state's people and locales. And there's terrific writers from Jhumpa Lahiri to Dave Eggers to Anthony Bourdain to.
And they juxtapose with the stories from the 30s?
They don't reprint any. They run a lot of statistics from the 30s in the back, but no, it's just kind of in the spirit of the WPA project, basically.
Such a wonderful thing. I sometimes wonder why we aren't doing that now.
Yeah, well,
let me segue into the Guggenheim Fellowship. Tell me a little bit about that, which is a high honor. I believe is it a $40,000 award? And what are you going to do with your fellowship?
Right now I'm hopefully finishing my 5th book, which is a novel set during World War II in Europe. And when it's done, I'm going to try to use the Guggenheim to write a book finally set totally here in the Mountain West. And I want to write about the fur trade. So that was what the pitch, the 3 pages I sent to the Guggenheim Foundation, is that I really want to write about maybe 1830s when the Snake River was full of beavers, and how European fashion for hats was really driving westward expansion and really forcing us to change our ecosystems radically. Hauling. One season the Hudson Bay Company was taking 20 or 30,000 beavers out of the Snake, and how that is driven by very wealthy people in New York or in London or in Paris. It's fascinating to me.
That does sound really, really interesting. And you mentioned talking about staying in Idaho. You're just finishing up a tenure as Idaho's writer-in-residence, which afforded you the opportunity to travel around the state. And what was that like, and what kind of experiences did you have?
Yeah, it was a lovely experience. You really get to see parts of the state, at least that I hadn't seen. You know, I went to Rexburg or Driggs or Coeur
We do
d'Alene.
readings?
And you give readings, and you get to meet with people. I met with a lot of students, which I really liked.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, hopefully, you know, often I feel like I'm an ambassador for Idaho when I'm traveling, giving readings outside the United States, or, you know, even in the East Coast, where people think we dig our way out from 6-foot snowdrifts to go get the mail every morning and carry 6 shooters around, you know.
Yeah, you wrote an article in, what was it? It was a National Smithsonian
yeah.
magazine about Boise. Yeah, it was nice.
Well, you know, there's always strange misconceptions about the West. But even here, you know, Idaho's such a large state that I felt like I could, in some small way, show, especially high school students, you know, show them that you don't have to necessarily live in New York or Paris to be a writer, to be a professional writer, and that, you know, there's a lot of, like Brady, a lot of good nationally and internationally renowned writers living right here in Idaho.
Back to what you mentioned, that you're working on a book on World War II now. There's a, I think, just beautiful, wonderful story in Memory Wall about a woman thinking back to her time in Germany during the time of the Holocaust. Is this a particular interest of yours, that time period?
Very much so. Yeah, this whole novel, which is quite long already, that I've been working on and off for about 5 years, is set during World War II. And during the research for that, I found a deportation transport manifest, so basically a list of people shoved onto a train. And that was from 1943, and it was from Hamburg, and it had the names of 16 girls on it, and it also prints their birth dates. And when you just do the simple math, you see none of them were older than 16 years old. So it took me a long time to try to figure out how I could possibly make fiction about that, but it wouldn't let me go either, you know. So
well, it's wonderful is not the right word for such a sobering topic, but it's, I would agree with the reviewer who talked about Luminous. It's a wonderful story. Let's go back to your book list, and we have some picks from our staff as well. You'd like to recommend, speaking of a little bit sad subjects, Every Man Dies Alone. Is this as sad as it sounds?
It's an amazing book, actually. It was written in 24 days.
Oh, actually, I do know about this book.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I want to read this.
Yeah. By a man named Hans Fallada, who was imprisoned, if that's the right word, or confined in a Nazi insane asylum for the last 2 years of the war, and left basically broken. And he was a journalist before the war and had written some fiction. And he wrote this book in 24 days. It's a very long book, and it's really almost a thriller. And it's about these quiet, it's about a true story about a couple who lived in Berlin and left postcards urging social resistance all over Berlin, just little anonymous postcards that they tuck into crevices and walls. And it really takes on the power of a thriller, and you really get a sense of what it's like to live where you're afraid all the time. You know, it's something we take for granted I take for granted so deeply that it rarely occurs to me that I could be being watched, that everything I could be doing is being watched and judged.
I just went to the Holocaust Museum for, I think, my 3rd time, and there's a movie at the end there that I hadn't ever taken time to watch, and in it is testimonies of survivors. And this one woman, she was in the Resistance, talked about how you were always being watched, and in her case, her friends were smoking a type of cigarette at a cafe that only the Nazis would have known had come in a parachute, you know, that it was an American brand cigarette. And they left the stubs in there. They were followed and killed because of their cigarettes.
Wow.
So, you know, the smallest of things, as you say, and I have read about this book, and it ties back into your interest in World War II as well.
That's true. But that book is an amazing story also in terms of its publisher. They took a big chance. This little press in New Jersey called Melville House Press took a chance in printing it, and now the book's selling extremely well. And you know, you're just so glad that somebody translated and brought that book over.
Yeah, because he didn't survive.
No, he died in '47.
On a lighter topic, rock and roll will save your life.
Yeah, this is maybe the opposite of the last book we're talking about. It's by a writer named Steve Almond, and it's really for readers of maybe my generation and 20 years up. You know, Steve, I think, is maybe in his late 40s, and it's about people who fell in love with music on vinyl and then went to cassettes and then, you know, somehow got involved in collecting CDs and now are trying to adjust to this world of iTunes. And it's really a great kind of homage to rock and roll, but it's not about the biographies of artists or anything. It's
he's in Idaho tonight, right?
He is.
Maybe
he's
even
in
watching.
Sun Valley
Hello.
right now.
And going to your science interests, I know you write a regular science column. Is it for the Boston Globe?
Yeah.
Insectopedia.
Yeah, Insectopedia is a really fun book. It's got 26 chapters, A to Z, but it's not. Each one is not about an insect. Each one is kind of a celebration of paying attention to the world, these little invisible, tiny worlds around us that insects present us with. So, he profiles cricket fights in China and homosexuality in bugs, and there's all kinds of really strange topics. And if you don't love one, you just flip to the next one. It's a terrific summer read because you're surrounded by your neighbor's bug zapper killing mosquitoes right next to you, and it kind of makes you reimagine what's going on in the lawn.
Yeah, I had a driveway moment coming here listening to a piece on ants. I almost didn't make it out of the car. I had to turn it off. It was very interesting in a weird kind of way. And finally, appropriately enough, you're recommending something called The Summer Book.
Yeah, that's the only old book I put on the list. It's a beautiful story. It's also told in little vignettes, very short chapters, about a 6-year-old girl, Sophia, and her grandmother. It's by a Swedish writer, and it was written in 1972. And it's just this wonderful, you just feel happy and full of light. It's about just living on this island in Scandinavia and all these tiny little adventures that these people have, these two women, this a girl and a woman have at the bookends of life, a 6-year-old and on her way into life, and grandmother who's on her way out of life.
Well, great. Well, we will have all of Tony's recommendations on our book list on our website. So have no fear if you haven't been able to write all this down or you're coming in partway through the program. We will have those on our website as well. Let's take a call right now from Glenn in Chalice. Glenn, go ahead, please.
Yes, thanks for taking my call, Marcia.
Sure.
Anthony, I like what you do, and I was just wondering if there's any books that you would recommend for teenagers.
Teenagers. Great question. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for your call, Glenn.
No problem.
There is a book called The Invention of Hugo Cabret that my children love. It's kind of a graphic novel. It's so every few pages there's a gorgeous drawing. It's all black and white. It's a very compelling story about a boy who discovers automatons in Paris, which sounds very confusing, but they're these like clockwork robots before the age of robots. Beautiful book. Absolutely recommend.
Okay, The Invention of Hugo Cabret. We'll put that on our book list. Now we're going to do something different. We're going to go to some Idaho PTV staff picks, which we haven't done before. I've done this show for years. We asked some people at our office, including me, how amazing, what their books would be and picks would be. And I'm recommending a single square picture. This is written by Katie Robinson, who's a former Idaho Statesman, a journalist, and she's a Korean American. She's an adoptee, and a single square picture is all she had as a memory, speaking of memories, of her mother. It was sewn inside her jacket when she was sent off as an adoptee to Utah, I believe. It's a beautifully written book about trying to go back to Korea and find her family, and I think is on the leading edge of many books we'll see about this type of topic, trying to go back through memory as a foreign adoptee and find your family. From my colleague Joan Cartan Hansen, again appropriately to our topic tonight, she recommends The Brain That Changes Itself. She says, imagine stroke patients cured or emotional disorders overcome, and thinking makes it so. The Brain That Changes Itself is a fascinating look at the plasticity of our brains, which you were talking about before. It's not just a geek book, she said. This is a page-turner that has implications for everyone, and a book that gives me hope. And I think, yes, those of us in the middle of our lives need some hope about the brain's plasticity. We're starting to forget where our keys are and everything. More than that. From Ron Pisaneski, our program director, we have a great selection. The Big Burn by Tim Egan. Tim's been on this show, and he wrote a book about the Dust Bowl. He's a New York Times reporter. It's about the 1910 fires. Ron says it's a wonderfully written book about an event here in Idaho and the impact it's had on natural resources for nearly 100 years. So that's The Big Burn. From Kevin, who is in our IT department and helps us with everything on the web, he recommends Lies My Teacher Told Me by James Loewen. Kevin says, history texts in our schools have been whitewashed and controversy removed over the decades. Lies My Teacher Told Me takes pivotal moments in people in our history, like Helen Keller's activist life and Woodrow Wilson's racial policies, and gives us a firmer grasp of what happened and the motivations behind what occurred. That sounds interesting. Lies My Teacher Told Me. And from Cassandra, who's back in the back working hard on the show. In graphics, she recommends, and this might be good for young people as well, Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. She says, I like this book because it has very smart children as the characters you root for and the enemies you despise, while the adults are the government that leads them through the war. So that might be another pick for a young adult. And from Melanie, also hard at work as our associate producer, Anne of Green Gables, a great classic by Lucy Maud Montgomery. And Melanie says, as a young girl, this was one of the first books I read that had a strong female character. In the course of 4 books, she went from an orphan to a school teacher raising 2 distant relatives to a school superintendent with a bachelor's degree. For a woman in the 1800s, this came across as amazing to me because she did it all by working hard and not giving up. And so I wanted to ask you, I think all of your stories in Memory Wall are written from a female point of view except for one. Is that right?
Wow, yeah, I haven't been asked that yet. That does seem right. A lot of female protagonists.
A lot of strong women there. Is
It's
that
not necessarily intentional, but yeah, I guess I must be very interested in that.
Is it difficult to write in a female voice, or it sounds like you don't even think about that, really?
I don't. I mean, I think obviously men and women are very different, but you have to rely on a lot of commonalities. Falling in love or getting lost or being afraid, those things feel the same to all of us. And so you have to take that leap as a fiction writer. I sometimes tell my students who are afraid to cross the gender line that you have to try it. I mean, that's the whole point, is to try to engage in empathy with people all over the world, and other genders as part of that.
Well, we're going to, very quickly, we've got a couple of recommendations for other strong women that are in books. From Marilyn, the Stieg Larsson series. This is very popular now in the movie. These crime novels, she said, combine several interests of mine. I like to see women portrayed as bright, capable, and able to succeed, even if they adopt a unique and controversial persona. This is all the better if these women are trying to make the world a better place. I find Lisbeth Salander to fit that role perfectly. There's no computer she can't hack. I'm also a strong believer in a free press. I love to see journalists fight the good fight despite tremendous imbalances of power and money. I admit I read these until 2 a.m., she says. And from Margaret, another book about a strong woman, Portrait of a Lady, classic, Henry James. She says, Henry James isn't always the easiest author, but he wrote very convincingly about women, and Isabel Archer, the protagonist, is a great literary creation. She's a prime example of how beautiful, intelligent, compassionate women who have it all wreck their lives by picking the wrong man. And finally, on a light note, from Kim, Daisy Faye and the Miracle Man by Fannie Flagg. It's warm-hearted, rollicking fun, she says. We've only got about 30 seconds left. Speaking of fun, what's next for you?
Well, I'm going to go on book tour for this new book, and then I'm going to try to finish this novel all fall. I'm going to be working on that novel and probably go to Europe to make sure I've got several of the locations correct.
And I understand someone's interested in maybe making a movie out of one of these
That's
stories?
right. Yeah, we've optioned the first story to some mysterious Brazilian film producers. And, you know, that stuff's always interesting to me. I don't really get involved in writing the screenplay or anything, but it feels good, and that means somebody's reading the work, so that's good.
Well, I'm so happy to have had you here once again. You've been listening to Anthony Doerr. He's an award-winning Idaho author. His newest book is called Memory Wall. I encourage you to read it. And check out our website for the list of all the books we just talked about and more. Thank you.
Presentation of dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho. To order a copy of this program from Idaho Public Television, call our toll-free number or visit us on the World Wide Web